Hello and welcome to this Christmas special of Quake It Up. The jumper is back out again, and I was thinking about, well, what can I do this year that's Quakerly and Christmassy at the same time, considering Quakers don't actually really do Christmas. See my video last year on Do Quakers Celebrate Christmas? And anyway, if you are a British person, or even a British Quaker, I am certain that at some point, even already, maybe right now, or certainly in the future, you will be eating sweets, maybe of this variety. Other brands are available, but in particular I'm going to be focusing on specific brands. And you know, this happens every year. The quality streets come out, or you know, the celebrations come out, or something from Cadbury's come out, and I would say, oh well, yeah, you know, they're all Quaker companies. Not anymore, obviously, but they were all originally Quaker companies. And I thought, Quakers and chocolate, what is more Christmassy and more Quakerly at exactly the same time? So in this video we're going to be looking at Quakers and chocolate. Why is there a connection between Quakers and chocolate, and what that has given us as Britons and also the world. So Quakers really were, especially in Britain, on the forefront in many ways actually of the development of chocolate in the UK, especially when it came to chocolate bars. We're going to be looking at three families and three companies in particular. We're going to be looking at the Fry's of Bristol. We're going to be looking at the Cadbury's of Birmingham, and close to my heart obviously, we're going to look at the Rowntree's of York. And so the Quakerness of the chocolate trade really came about at the end of the 1700s, beginning of the 1800s. And there's quite a lot of reasons as to why Quakers and chocolate came together as they did. And it's not because Quakers just loved chocolate. The main reason for it is that slowly but surely since the 1600s, as we get towards the end of the 1700s, Quakers, in terms of their socioeconomic status, are on the up. And a lot of them are starting to have quite a lot of money, but couldn't participate in any actual public part of life because they were Quakers, they were nonconformists, so they couldn't go to university to get a degree, they couldn't sit in Parliament, they couldn't be judges. And so what are these sort of middle-class, relatively well-to-do people going to do but go into business? And over the course of certainly the 1700s, the reputation of Quaker businessmen was really quite good. It was the reason why ultimately, a couple in the next century, why Quaker Oats chose the name Quaker Oats, because Quakers were known to be respectable businessmen. They didn't lie, they had fixed prices, and were seen as being honest. So you could trust your business dealings with them because they weren't going to do one over on you. And a reason why chocolate became so important was because of a couple of reasons, but mainly because Fry's, who were, I'd say, the first Quaker chocolatiering family, were apothecaries, and at the time it was seen to have huge health benefits. So he was an apothecary, so he was selling all sorts of stuff. And he was selling chocolates for its health benefits. Now it's important to note at this point that we are not talking about chocolate bars at this point, more on that later, but we are talking about hot chocolate effectively, or cocoa. And because it was a drink, the second reason why it was important to Quakers was because of it being an alternative to alcohol. I'm pretty sure that Quakers had always been against alcohol. You know, I can't really see, you know, Robert Barclay being a big drinker particularly, but certainly the temperance movement in the UK was certainly starting to gain traction with the Methodists and so on at that time. So the idea of teetotalism was certainly rising at that time as well, and chocolate was seen as a helpful, or cocoa, hot chocolate, was seen as a valuable tool to get people off drink and onto chocolate instead. And so Quakers were quite happy to be promoting this drink that not only was lovely and tasty, but also stopped those people going to the pub and drinking beer. I was looking to see if American Quakers got on the chocolatiering wagon as well, and it seems that they didn't. And I wonder whether this was because either they were more rural, or because they weren't forbidden from public office in the same way, or from public life in the same way that British Quakers were. So maybe they were more freer in terms of their public life, what they wanted to do as a career. Maybe they weren't limited to commerce in the same way that British Quakers were. Maybe, I don't know. So on to the first chocolatiering family then, and that was Fry's. They're probably the least well known nowadays, certainly, because they merged with Cadbury's, who are very well known, in 1919. So you don't necessarily hear too much about them now. But Joseph Fry, as I said, was an apothecary in Bristol, and he originally sold chocolate because he thought it was healthy and because it stopped them from drinking alcohol. And he was really the first to really industrialise the chocolate production in England, certainly. So he fitted it in with the wider industrial revolution of the early 1800s, introducing machinery in order to manufacture chocolate in a way that hadn't really been done before. And by 1824, 40% of all of Britain's cocoa imports were being used by Fry's. So that's an outrageous amount. And a couple of years later, so I think this probably is going beyond Joseph Fry and when he passed on to his heirs, they produced the first chocolate bar. So Quakers invented chocolate bars. Amazing. In 1847 that was. Now you might hear the name Fry and you might think, is this related to, are they related to Elizabeth Fry, the famous prison reformer? And I will say, yes, she is related to these Frys. She married into the family. I think she married a nephew of Joseph Fry, and she's really interesting. She's also a Gurney. I think from her mother's side, she's also a Berkeley. So she's so Quaker. Anyway, so yes, she's also related to these chocolatiers. As with all of these stories that we're going to be looking into, as I said earlier, what marked these Quaker chocolatiers from other industrialists of the time was an understanding of trying to improve the lives of those that work for them. Now, it's not perfect, and they are still Victorian, and I'm not going to say that they were, had the best welfare that we today in the 21st century would recognise as the best of the best. Clearly not, but for the time, there were moves to try and make things better than maybe other people would have done it. So, for example, the fact that I got for Fry's was that the weekly wage for people working in his factory was 10 shillings a week. Don't know what that would equate to today, but 10 shillings a week versus if you were working in your farm as a farm labourer, you were earning 7 shillings a week. So you're 3 shillings per week better off. Again, what that equates to, I'm not too sure. The second Quaker chocolatiering family. Chocolatiering, is that a word? I'm going with it, sounds cool. The second Quaker chocolatiering family was arguably the most famous of all, and they are the Cadburys. So John Cadbury was the starter of the chocolate wing of his father's company, and his father was originally a tea merchant. So again, there's links there with, tea was also used as a way to try and get people off the alcohol, and John Cadbury saw the advantages and the potential lucrative value of the chocolate market, so opened his first shop in 1824. So Fry's had already started by then, and he opened his first factory in Bourneville in 1831. So was obviously doing very well in order to be able to open an entire factory. Now, how Cadbury's really managed to start getting itself off the ground really well and starting to make really good publicity was because it was able to further the industrialization that Fry's had introduced, but in a way to get rid of a lot of the impurities from the chocolate making process to make it pure and honest, which again, nice Quaker values there getting into their chocolate. And that's how they sold it. They sold it not necessarily as Quakerly, but they sold it as pure, honest chocolate. Not all of it, because apparently some of these like rogue pirate chocolatiering people were going off putting brick powder in their chocolate and stuff. So to make it, I think, to get the colour right or something. But none of that at Cadbury's. Oh no. Only pure, honest chocolate. And that's how they sold it, and it did really well. Another thing that they did to try and make it more, to increase publicity and to increase sales, was they were the first to sell boxes of chocolate, which of course nowadays is, par for the course. But in those days was obviously very inventive. So just selling boxes of chocolate, which you can have at celebrations or whatever to enjoy with your family. But apparently, certain Quakers were unhappy with these because the design seemed a bit garish and a bit unquakerly. So, not so great Cadbury. And so let's speak about Bournville a bit. I'm sure there are other Quakers who can talk a lot better about that. Those are obviously today Birmingham is arguably. I did a video a couple of months ago about where the true capital of Quakerism should be, and Birmingham was certainly up there as to one of my 3 suggestions, because that's where Woodbrook is. That's where so like the Quaker academics are, the University of Birmingham, and so on. And it's all because of the links with Cadbury's, and the Quaker leaders of Cadbury's gave a lot to the community, and obviously gave a lot to the Quaker community there as well. Speaking of Bournville, so that was the factory. You can go visit Cadbury World there today and get so much chocolate. But again, so as with Fry's, the Cadbury family really tried to do a lot in order to improve the lot for their workers. So in 1845 they built 144 cottages for their workers with like gardens and nice little things, and there were corner shops and all sorts. So it was a proper little village. And the idea was to try and get them out of the slums of Birmingham, get them into nice little Bournville with gardens and stuff, and they could just go into work and happy days. Seems to be that it was, they came with a lot of caveats, like they weren't allowed to do lots of things like drink alcohol. But, if that means that you have a nice commute and you have a garden, would you give up alcohol for that? Yeah, I mean, why not? And by the early 20th century, the residents of Bournville, in terms of their infant mortality rates, was half that of the main city of Birmingham. So obviously in terms of general well-being and health of the people living there, obviously much better, which is great. Cadbury's was also the first company, again I didn't know, was the first company to introduce the 5-day working week, which, obviously nowadays the battle is to try and get a 4-day working week, but obviously in the 1800s there was no such thing as even a 5-day working week. So that Cadbury's was the first company to introduce that, and that was a Quaker initiative, I think. Amazing. Chocolate and Quakers doing great for working standards in the UK. Happy days. Over the course of the 20th century, like with all these companies, the Quakerishness of the leadership slowly declined. There was the merger between Fry's and Cadbury's in 1919, but Cadbury's lost its independence in 2010, so it lasted a really long time. Well, it was obviously a huge company, but lost it, was bought by Kraft in 2010, so they're now Mendel's International or whatever, and so there is no Quaker element to Cadbury's anymore, unfortunately. And so we come to the final Quaker chocolate family, and that is Rowntree's. Now, if you've watched these videos before, you'll know that name might seem familiar, and you'll be right. You'll be thinking of John Wilhelm Rowntree, one of the founders of early liberal Quakerism, which I've talked about so much. And he is related. He's the oldest son of Joseph Rowntree, who was who built up the Rowntree Chocolate Company. So his company was certainly the youngest company. Both Fry's and Cadbury's were well and truly on their way by this point, but not in Yorkshire. So here we go. Quakers chocolate in Yorkshire. Even better. Now, I didn't realise, I was doing some research as to, I was thinking, what is Rowntree's actually, what do they make? And I could think of fruit pastels, but that was really all I could really think of. But actually, when you delve into what they've created, the list is, I mean, from a British perspective, it's absolutely boggling. So Rowntree's were responsible for Kit Kats, Smarties, Quality Streets, as I showed at the beginning of this video, After Eights, Lion Bars, and Yorkie Bars. I mean, I suppose Yorkie Bars isn't so... I never really thought of that. I come from York. Never thought of that. Anyway, the reason why you don't necessarily link these, because eventually Rowntree's was bought by Nestle in the 1980s or something. So they all just have the Nestle logo and you don't really think much about it. But just like in Bourneville, Rowntree's created the village of New Earswick, which is just outside of York, again for their workers in order to improve quality of living for their workers. Again, brilliant stuff, brilliant behaviour. And just like the Cadburys as well, the Rowntrees were, and John William Rowntree was all about this as well, was all about education and adult schooling and continued education, they called it. So this was when you finished school, effectively further education. So they would do all the leadership of Rowntrees were part of that, so we're teaching as well as leading the company in order to improve the education of the workers, which is brilliant. And the Rowntrees generally are very well known. I hope in the UK, but certainly in York. Seaborn Rowntree, who was another son of Joseph Rowntree, is very well known for his study into poverty in York. I think this was in reaction to the Boer War, so we're in the early 20th century now, and it was very influential in terms of understanding why are all our soldiers so ill, and helping raise awareness for the poverty that existed, not just in York obviously, but in the entire of the UK. Also, on a side note, they weren't Quakers, but Terry's, as in Terry's Chocolate Orange, also are originally a Yorkshire chocolate family. So, go Yorkshire again. And as I said, the fact that the company Rowntrees was eventually sold to Nestle in 1988. So by 2010, so when Cadbury's were sold, those three companies, Fry's had pretty much stopped existing. Nestle was owned by a multinational. Rowntrees was owned by, Cadbury's was owned by a multinational, and Rowntrees was owned by a multinational as well. So the Quaker element has certainly been lost. And with that too, I suppose a lot of the Quaker values were lost as well. I mean, chocolate production is rife with potential issues that Quakers would certainly have qualms with. So for example, it's linked very highly with deforestation, with child exploitation, and the use of palm oil as well, and the effect that has on the environment. So these are certainly elements, maybe legacies of the Quaker involvement in chocolate production, which maybe would give a modern Quaker pause for thought. Interestingly, I found out that there's no Quaker chocolate available at Friend's House. So if you were to go to the centre of British Quakerism in London, you will not find any Cadbury's bar. You will not find a Kit Kat. You will not find a Yorkie bar, because they tend to go for fair trade alternatives, which is quite right, and they should. And you'd think maybe if these companies were still owned by Quakers, that perhaps this might be better. But these were owned by Quakers, but it's just because it was a different time, and it was probably quite impossible in the late 1700s, early 1800s to have any sort of real effect on the production right from the source. But obviously this was where the Rowntree family in York really made their money, and so a lot of the foundation. So that I think Cadbury's have a foundation as well, which works for things that Quakers do care about, such as poverty and equality. The Rowntree Foundation does similar things, and so obviously those foundations were only ever able to exist because of the wealth that was gained from chocolate sales. So I suppose that's something to be thankful for, and that there is a force in the world that is good and still working on Quaker values, even though they're maybe not Quaker anymore, but that they were able to do that because of the money made from chocolate. Oh yeah, that's true. So it says on the back actually that it was actually Quality Street is actually made by Macintosh, but Rowntree's bought Macintosh in the 1960s, so it's all good. It's still a Quaker chocolate, definitely. Paper packaging. They're becoming more Quaker as we go. Now I'm really boring. I only like the green triangles, the purple one, and the orange cream. The rest, useless to me. Absolutely useless. I mean, does anyone eat the coconut eclair? Who are these people? And that's hilarious, actually, because there's only 2. So yeah, that is Christmas Quaker chocolate. So the next time you're delving into your quality streets or your celebrations, just think this would never happen if Quakers didn't get involved in chocolate. I'm going to be doing a couple more videos, hopefully out before the end of the year. I'm going to want to be doing one on the basically a roundup of the year from a Quaker perspective. So please do keep an eye out for that one. But if I don't see you before then, have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. See you in 2024. Thank you very much for watching the video. If you liked it, please do click on the thumbs up and the subscribe button to get more videos about Quakerism in the UK today. It really does help, and thanks once again.